Hello everyone, and a happy Chanukah, Freilich and Chanukah. I hope that you're all doing well and you're feeling the beauty of this time of the year. I want to share with you something that happened to me recently, and I feel that there's a real tie-in to the holiday of Chanukah. About a month ago, I began feeling chest pains, and it was more of a pressure than a pain, but it grew, and I sort of ignored it. I knew I had been eating a lot, and it's just health-wise, exercise, I wasn't where I should be, but I just let it go and kept doing my thing. And a few weeks ago, I ran a Shabbat in Chicago, and throughout that Shabbat, I just felt this pressure on my left side, in my heart, but radiating to my arm. It didn't feel right. And then the following day, I flew back to New York, and I went to a wedding that evening, the wedding of my niece. And during the chuppah, I just felt the pressure was getting really, really severe. So after the chuppah, I turned to my father, who was there at the chas and at the wedding of his granddaughter, and I explained to him what that pain was. And he happens to be an ER doctor. And I explained to him the pain, and he said, "You should go to the emergency room right now." And I said, "Well, maybe I'll go after the wedding." He said, No, go now. So I said, "Okay, I'm in New Jersey. Maybe I'll go to New York in case they keep me overnight." He says, "No, go to the nearest emergency room." So I said, "Okay, I guess I'll drive to the nearest emergency room." He said, "No, you have to call Hatzalah." Okay, he says to call Hatzalah, I shouldn't drive. We called Hatzalah, and they brought me to the ER. And they treated it like a heart attack. Now, it was not a heart attack. It was a warning sign. There were a lot of warning signs that I wasn't where I should be with the cholesterol and triglycerides and the stress test later on and all sorts of other things that were going on in my life that really were unhealthy, and in particular when it came to eating. I ended up spending the night in the hospital there, and I took tests the next morning, and they decided that I needed an angiogram. And so they took me by ambulance from New Jersey to Columbia Hospital in New York. And the next day, they scheduled an angiogram, and that's taking a tube, sticking it through your groin into your heart, and they just wanted to make sure there was no blockage, and there was nothing that could even lead to a heart attack. So they did those tests on me, and it was scary. I'm not an old man, and but I do have a history. My grandfather passed away at the age of 45 from a heart attack, and I'm 45 today. So there was reason to be concerned. And they did the tests, and thank God I did not need I didn't need anything more than just medication. I didn't need a stent. They put me on medication, and they told me to lose weight and take much better care of myself. And they sent me home, and it took a few weeks to recover, and I'm back to myself. But there were 3 lessons that I learned, and this is really what I want to share with you. Lesson number 1 is the following. We live for today, and living for today sometimes that expression is used for those who live in the moment, and they're just running after pleasure and desire, and that's living in the moment for. But the truth of the matter is, a person can be doing great things and still live in the moment. Right? We're doing what we need to do. We're just trying to get by, and the reality is that we have to think long term. And I may be preaching to the converted here, but I'll tell you the truth. What goes through the mind of a person who doesn't take care of themselves, who sort of doesn't eat correctly and doesn't exercise? So I sort of looked at myself and tried to figure out what my thought process was, and I thought two things were running through my mind before this incident. Number 1, the thought of really controlling my eating meant in my mind an austere life, a difficult life where every food has to be sort of weighed and figured out. Is this okay? Is this not okay? And a lot of holding back and a lot of restriction. And my lifestyle and the life that I live is sort of a gregarious, open, happy kind of a life that involves focusing on many things besides that kind of a fixation or focus on my health. And the thought was, I can either live a very austere life all my life, or sort of do what I'm doing and eat what I want and, live life and eat as many bowls of cholent and as many helpings of a chopped liver. And then when I'm, 65, 70, I'll pay my dues, I'll spend my 2 weeks in the hospital. And that's the price of not living an austere life for 50 or 60 years beforehand. Of course, that's nonsense, because here I am, 45, and I'm in the hospital. But it's a little bit more than that. I think that we think to ourselves, those who spend all this time and this money and this effort trying to take care of themselves, perhaps they'll live a few extra years. So at the tail end, instead of dying at the age of 75 or 80, they'll live until 85, 90. But those years at the end, what can you do in those years anyways? You're going to be in a nursing home. You may have Alzheimer's. It's sort of like those years at the end. I don't know if that's worth the trade-off of all of those years beforehand, where I want to sort of not have to fixate on the day-to-day of watching my weight and spending half an hour a day doing exercise. There's a lot to accomplish and a lot to do. Now, that's all nonsense, and I know that, and I knew that before, but I want to share with you two thoughts about that. Number one, and this is sort of a very Jewish thought. When we think of a bucket list, those things that we want to do before we die, before we kick the bucket, what's on that list? Is that list all about, I want to bungee jump, I want to go bungee jumping beforehand, or I want to drink Mai Tais on a beach, right? What's on that bucket list? That extra pleasure, that adventure that we are not doing now. And when we think about it, all of those things, sort of the standard things that people write on their bucket list, are not the pleasure that the Jewish people really, really enjoy. In other words, what is the Jewish bucket list? What is the pleasure that we consider the ultimate pleasure? Now, I'd love to tell you, well, it's obviously learning Torah or doing mitzvahs, but to be practical, sometimes that's difficult and sometimes we're not in the mood. But what is the Jewish pleasure that is much more pleasurable than Mai Tais on a beach or bungee jumping or traveling to Spain? What is the pleasure? And the answer is, it's something called nachas. Nachas, it's the great Jewish pleasure. Now, it is that feeling when our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren grow up to be amazing human beings, Ovdei Hashem, serving the Almighty and serving humanity. Seeing our life's work bear fruit. Other amazing human beings that we nurtured, that we created, that we molded and we taught and we sweated over and we cried for. And to see all that blossom and grow, that's called nachas. That's where it's at. Now, when we're young, nachas is a little bit, few and far between. Perhaps we get married, it's wonderful, and perhaps we have a baby, and then maybe a few years later another child, and then a bris or a kiddush. 13 years later we have a bar mitzvah. Another 10 years later perhaps we have a wedding, and the nachas is, it exists and it's wonderful, and we see our children come home each day with their projects, but the amazing nachas, the nachas that really inspires and animates us, it's a little bit far between. But as we grow older, and as our family grows, and as our children get married and have children of their own, the simchas, the happy occasions, begin to pile up. They're hot and heavy and they're exciting and it's wonderful. That's when the nachas begins to bear fruit. That's when the dividends begin to have their own dividends. That's when you have one bar mitzvah, one bris, one wedding after the next, month after month. My father was an only child of a widow mother. Only child, the only Klatzko, Dr. Naftali Klatzko, one man from one widow Russian mother. And that man had 9 children. And those children have many children. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Each of those children have many children. And at this point in his life, every month there's another simcha, a bar mitzvah, a wedding, a kiddush, a bris, an upsharon. He can't even keep up. And the nachas that we cherish so much, it increases tenfold. So therefore, when we get to be a little bit older and this greatest of pleasures begins to become our lot, why not be around for that? It could be the ages of 70 and 80. Those are the most enjoyable times of our life. That's when we see all of our work come to fruition. Could you imagine a scientist who works really hard, 20 years trying to prove a theorem, and then a month before it is proven, he passes on, and he never has a chance to see his life work bear fruit? It's sad, isn't it? We have that opportunity. We can watch our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. So why not be around for that? Let's take a little bit better care of ourselves. And so, I was sitting with my good friend Michael Prell, and he asked me the following question. He said, Rabbi Klatzko, let me ask you something. How old is your youngest? I said, right now he's 3 years old. He said, how old would you have to be to meet your youngest child's grandchildren? My youngest child's name is Meir. Meir's 3. I'm 45. So most probably the age of 87, 88, that's accurate. If I'm 87 years old, if I make it to 87, I will meet my youngest child's grandchildren. Michael said, there you go. That is your goal, to meet your youngest child's grandchildren. Work at it, take care of yourself, be there for the Jewish people, be there for your family. Watch yourself a little bit. You don't have to eat every jelly donut on Chanukah. And 2, 3 latkes may be enough. It doesn't have to be 10 with lots of applesauce and lots of sour cream. And it's funny because as I'm making this video, I'm thinking to myself, how would me, the me of 2 months ago, have responded to this video? I would have probably rolled my eyes and said, okay, another, take care of yourself. But, it's so. I mean, I'm living proof. There you go. But there are 2 other lessons that I want to share with you, and I think, these are Chanukah lessons. The first lesson is also a Chanukah lesson. The Greeks, they very much venerated the body. They worshiped the body. They idolized. They put the body on a pedestal. Their Olympics had people competing in the nude because you want to show off the body and there's nothing to be ashamed of. And we may think, well, since we're not Greek, we have to go the opposite extreme, and therefore we don't have to take care of our body at all. But that's not so either. There's a derech emtzai, there's a middle road between competing nude in the Olympics and eating 4 bowls of challah. There's a middle road, and that middle road is a pretty good road. And it's a matter of self-control. And I'll tell you something very interesting. And I heard this from a great person, that self-control in eating will help a person learn self-control in the other aspects of their life that they're struggling with. So if you're struggling with a shmir seinayim, watching your eyes, if you're struggling with laziness, if you're struggling with getting up for davening in the morning, if you're struggling with anger, controlling yourself when it comes to food will help exercise that self-control muscle, and it will help you in other areas as well. Okay, number 2. When I was brought to the hospital, so I had my phone on me, and I took a picture. I had someone take a picture of me, and I posted it on Facebook, and I posted the words, chest pain plus wedding equals emergency room, please daven for, and I gave my name. And I put it on my wall, and I figured maybe people will daven for me and it will help. We didn't know what the prognosis was, and we didn't, we didn't know what the diagnosis was. We just didn't know, and I really wanted people to daven. And I figured there'd be a few messages and a few people davening for me. Well, the reality is that after posting that on Facebook, it sort of exploded in a way that I had no idea that it would. I'm flattered, I'm embarrassed, I'm honored. The Jewish people picked up the ball and they ran with it. And they took that post, and it was reposted and reposted and reposted and reposted, and ultimately it ended up on an insane amount of walls. And the comments that came in, the blessings, the messages, we figured out that it ended up being seen by 500,000 people. And people were davening, and I can't even describe the outpouring of love from the Jewish people that I felt. And I learned an awesome lesson, a powerful lesson, and this is idea number 2. The idea is that our reach is greater than we give it credit for. Our friends, our acquaintances, people that we come in contact with, when we think about who we know and who our circle is, it is really much, much greater than that. At the moment, we have a certain amount of friends, but we also have a certain amount of people that we meet at shul, or that we meet in the gym, or that we meet at work. And then we have friends from our past who still feel close to us. We still have friends from our high school days, and perhaps from our elementary school days. We have people we have mentored, people we have trained, people we have touched, people we have serviced, people who know us from Facebook. Our reach is so great, and sometimes in our humbleness, we don't appreciate this. And when we don't, we're willing to do things that maybe aren't okay, because we think, come on, how many people will we affect? We should be aware that if we do the wrong thing, we affect many, many, many more people than we realize. Just like when we do the right thing, we affect many more people than we realize. Our reach is great, and in today's day and age, our reach is larger than we ever could have dreamt before. It's huge. You are significant to more people than you realize. If God forbid something happens to you, many more people will cry. Many more people will be sad. Your loss will be felt by people that you don't even know their names, because you've touched people. Now, I know I'm in the public eye, and because of that, I reach a lot of people. But this is not exclusive to me by any stretch. Every one of us is in the public eye. If we go to shul, if we go out to work, if we interface with people, if we interact with people in our community, it's much larger than we realize. So we must be extra careful to do the right thing, to take care of ourselves, to not do anything that's incorrect. And this leads me to concept number 3. Years ago, when I first started off being a rabbi, I was what they call a fighter. I was a fighter, I was a kanoi. I was hot and heavy and strong for Judaism, to the point that I was a little bit of a polarizing figure. Now, my reach at that time wasn't what it is today, but whoever I spoke with, I was very strong, and MS or bust. And when a person is a fighter, The nature of the fighter is that they'll make their friends, and they'll have their allies, and they'll have their followers, and then they'll have their enemies, they'll have their adversaries, they'll have those who don't agree with them, and will be outspoken against them. That's the nature of the fighter. And if you're a fighter and your cause is just, there is a place for you in this world. There is a place for the fighter. But personally, I've transitioned. I'm no longer the fighter. I've transitioned to become what I call the lover, the person of positivity. I want to be. I worked very hard for this. It wasn't easy for me. It didn't come easy. To begin to look at each person, no matter the background, no matter their denomination, Chassid, Litvak, Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, Chabad, Breslov, you name it, anyone out there, and see the good in them, because there is greatness. And it doesn't mean people don't have faults, and it doesn't mean that I don't understand where I feel they may fall short. But I also know where I fall short. But I love and appreciate everyone. And therefore, right before they brought me to the ER for the angiogram, I thought, what zchus, what merit can I post on Facebook that people can do in order to help me spiritually? And I thought of a lot of different mitzvot, but in the end I wrote the following. I wrote in the merit that I should be okay. Whoever's reading this, please take upon yourselves that you won't go negative on Facebook, that you won't write any negative posts on Facebook. That was what I asked, and that was passed around. Over 200,000 people read that for a week. Don't go negative on Facebook. And I'm hoping, of course, that week should turn into a month, should turn into a lifetime. Because when you go negative, you lose. I have to believe, I do believe, that one of the reasons that people had an outpouring of support for me was because I try to go positive. That no matter who they are, I accept them, and hopefully they accept me. And we'll grow together, each one in the relationship called Judaism. Each one tries to grow in that relationship. And I will stay positive. I will not be naive. I will not say that there are no problems within Judaism. There always have been, and there always will be. You know why? Because Judaism is made up of human beings. But just like human beings have their faults and their foibles, they also have greatness. They also have nobility. And I see it. I want to tell you that one of the great things that depress me today, and pretty much every day in the past little while, it gets me down. It really, I can't adequately describe what it does to my spirit, are people who post negative things on Facebook, particularly about my people. And it's not because, like I said, I'm naive. No. It's the fact that people live such small lives that they make a living out of negativity. And maybe their posts are accurate, and maybe so-and-so did something wrong, and maybe this scandal should not have been, and maybe that there does have to be a fighter here or a fighter there. But what happens when we transition from a fight to becoming just an ugly, negative person? There is a fellow I know who posts lots of negativity about the Jewish community on Facebook. And he gets lots of comments. There's more than one, and I don't think whoever is watching this will know who I mean. There's more than one, obviously. There are people who make a living out of this. And this particular person I'm thinking of gets a lot of negative comments, or a lot of comments that back him up from all the haters. All the haters, they've got a lot to say. Sometimes hundreds of comments. So I thought to myself, isn't that amazing? You know, here I am in the hospital, And I'm getting a lot of comments, positive comments, comments to bolster my spirit and pick me up and make me feel loved. And here's another fellow, and he also has hundreds of comments to his post, but there's a difference. You know what the difference is? If that fellow ever ends up in the ER, he's not going to get hundreds of positive comments. People will not be knocking the doors down to try to visit him in the hospital. You know? When he goes to the ER and we all end up one day needing treatment, there will not be people around to support him. Because the very nature of negativity is selfishness. You got a gripe? You know what I have in common with you? I have the same gripe. So let's fight this together. It's the power of negativity, and the power of negativity doesn't unify. It's selfish. It's a lot of angry people coming in a room together. And you know what happens if this person ends up in the ER? It's very simple. It's like piranhas that you take a piece of meat and you drop it in the fish tank. And they all go and they all munch on this piece of meat and they rip it to shreds, and when there's no meat left, they're not going to stick around. They'll just move on. They'll go on to the next person or the next cause that animates their negativity, that energizes their negativity. Stay positive, my friends. It is it's the power that will allow you to affect the world. You want to be a fighter? Pick your spots. Great people can be fighters and lovers as well, but they have established a reputation of being lovers, and therefore when they open their mouths and they have to say something negative, people will listen. But negative people who are negative in general, it's just negativity, and it's sad and it's pathetic, and it's being a bully. And I always say, don't bully my nation. They're my nation. Don't bully them. Are they perfect? No. But neither are my children. But I still wouldn't want anyone to bully them. And this is all Chanukah. This is Chanukah in a nutshell. You know, staying positive. On Chanukah, we light one light, and that light brings us to another light, and that light, a third light. It's a positive growth. And how do you influence people? Point number 2. Well, the whole idea of Chanukah is about influencing people. We take our menorah and we put it by the window or by the door and let other people see our positivity, let other people see our light. And who knows, with that light and that positivity and that energy, perhaps this is the last year we'll be in exile. So to recap, number 1, take care of yourselves. I'm working on myself. We'll be partners in this. It's not easy, but I'm feeling it's worth it. And obviously, if I don't take care of myself, besides that one day I may end up in the hospital, I don't feel great in general. And I can't be as productive, and I can't serve Hashem with all my energy. So take good care of yourself. Number 2, your reach is greater than you think. Just like the light of Chanukah, you put it by the window, people will see, people will learn from you. Don't underestimate how powerful you are and how many people's lives you touch. And point number 3, stay positive about life and specifically about your people. Stay positive. I don't mean be blind. I don't mean be naive. But look for the good. The Almighty didn't even like when Moshe Rabbeinu badmouthed his people. When Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Vehem yamin lo yaminu li," they won't believe me, Hashem got upset. How do you know? What are you speaking Lashon Hara about the Jewish people? Don't speak Lashon Hara about the Jewish people. They're Hashem's children. And believe me, He's going to stick up for them. Thank you very much. Have an amazing Chanukah. Spend time with your family. Play the dreidel. Eat the latke. And I wish you only love, only positivity, and holiness, holiness, holiness. Thank you.